that rebuilding. Now, how are we going to pay for it? Let's get down to what has been, I think, the most common complaint here. Oh, you're just going to borrow the money and we're going to run up the deficit. Well, Martin Feldstein was very clear today that if you make an investment in infrastructure, you're going to immediately employ people and you will be making a major step towards solving the deficit problem. You do that now, he said. Begin that investment now. Yes, you're going to borrow the money, not all of it, and there are ways that we can get that we'll deal with that, but there is a necessity of enhancing the economy. His suggestion was the infrastructure as one of the principal ways of doing that. Now, we have ways of financing this. It's been discussed forever, dating back to the mid and early 90s, that we ought to have an infrastructure bank. The Europeans have an infrastructure bank. It's proved to be very successful. The money goes out to build infrastructure. The repayment is made by bridge tolls, by fees on roads, by canal fees, other kinds of fees. That money comes back. It's circulated. The President has called for an infrastructure bank, taking an idea that's been before Congress for the last 20 years, and he said, let's do it. Let's do it. We can borrow money at the federal level, still less than 3%, sometimes 2%. Put that into an infrastructure bank, invite the private sector pension funds and others to become part of that bank, and then lend that money out to those projects that have a cash flow, toll bridges, sanitation projects, waterworks, other kinds of things, so that we can get this economy moving. We also had a program coming out of the stimulus bill called Build America Bonds, BABs, Build America Bonds. Those lasted all of 2 years, and then our colleagues here refused to reenact the Build America Bonds. These are other ways in which local entities can borrow the money and build the infrastructure and get their economy going. And furthermore, laying the foundation for future economic growth. You can't build a city on yesterday's infrastructure. You need to replace it, to be sure, and this is part of the problem in our cities, the aging infrastructure, the waterworks, the sanitation system, and the rest. We need to rebuild that, but you also need to expand the infrastructure. One final way that we can talk about financing this is how we do spend the tax revenue that does come in to the American Treasury. Right now, Congress is debating on how to spend money for the next fiscal year, which begins on October the 1st. How are we going to spend it? Part of that appropriation process is to appropriate $87 billion for the Afghanistan war in the coming year, October 1st through the 2014 year until September 30th. $87 billion for Afghanistan. How much money for flood protection in Colorado? Flood protection in my district? Flood protection across the eastern seaboard to build the seawalls? Virtually nothing. But $87 billion for Afghanistan. For what? For what? To build facilities that we will either destroy as we leave or will be destroyed shortly after we leave? $7 billion for the Afghan National Army, $2.5 billion of which is for good things to be done. No line items, no particular knowledge about what they're going to spend that money on. I suspect most of it's going to wind up in some bank account by some crook in the Bahrain banks. $2.5 billion. What could we do with $2.5 billion here in America? And by the way, we're drawing down the troops in Afghanistan. We're actually going to spend more money in Afghanistan next year than we are this year, even though we have 60% less troops in Afghanistan. We're making choices. Your representatives, 435 of us and 100 members of the Senate, are making choices about how your money is going to be spent. And by the way, I haven't talked about the nuclear bombs, 5,000 of them. We're going to rebuild them. Now there's a good investment. Really? I don't think so. Not when the levees in my district can't be rebuilt to protect my citizens from floods, to rebuild a nuclear weapon that we don't need in the first place? No, I don't think so. So we're making choices. We're making choices for you, the American taxpayers, about how your money is going to be spent. For me, I want to spend it in America. I want to spend it in American-made goods and equipment, not on products from China, as happened with the newly reopened San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge. Steel from China, not from America. I want that money spent here, and I want that money spent on our infrastructure, on our education, on research, energy projects. We're going to make choices. We're making those choices right now. We're up against the wall. By the end of this month, September 30th, the government runs out of money. Where are we going to spend it? Or are we going to spend it at all? We're just going to shut down government? I don't know. I'm worried. I'm worried about the choices that we're making. I'm worried about more expenditure in Afghanistan and not here at home. I'm worried about rebuilding all these nuclear weapons that, God willing, we'll never use. Choices. Can we actually build America? Can we find the willingness to create an infrastructure bank? Can we find the willingness to bring the money back home and spend it here to build this economy? Because ultimately, as our Joint Chiefs of Staff have said repeatedly, it's the American economy. Without that strength, there won't be military strength. I've gone on too far here. Mr. Tonko, let's begin to wrap this up.
Yeah, in fact, I will offer my closing comments.